Welcome to Passionate World Talk Radio. Educate, enlighten, entertain.
Hello, everyone. I'm going to read my disclaimer. Any views that you hear, information in this podcast may not be those of the host or the station. Please seek counsel, advice from your primary care physician regarding any information. Thank you. And this is Betsy Wurzel, your host of Chatting with Betsy on Passionate World Talk Radio, where our mantra is to educate, enlighten, and entertain. Folks, you're going to want to listen to my guest today. I have to say this. I just love my guest. I admire him. He is motivational. He is inspirational to me. And I just want to share a quick story before I tell you about my guest. Because my guest, he wrote this book. Terry Tucker wrote this book, Sustainable Excellence, 10 Principles to Leading Your Uncommon and Extraordinary Life. And because I read his book, I had the courage to ask Rick Edelman, who at the time started, he was the CEO, founder of the Edelman Financial Engines, and he has his own show, and he's a big financial guy. And I said, what's the chances of him coming on my show? And I would never know, right? It would bother me if I never asked him. And I did ask, and Rick Edelman did come on in January. So I owe my thanks to Terry Tucker. Terry Tucker is an author. He wrote the book I just mentioned, and he's a motivational speaker and a life coach for professionals ready to live an uncommon and extraordinary life. Terry came on my show last May of 2021, and Terry Tucker was a very busy guy. He was a NCAA Division I college basketball player. I hope I'm going to say this right. Citadel cadet, an undercover narcotics investigator, a SWAT team hostage negotiator, a high school basketball coach, a business owner, and most recently, a cancer warrior. And let me tell you, folks, Terry Tucker is an inspiration. He's not sitting home feeling sorry for himself and waiting to die. He is out there kicking butt. He is motivating people. He motivates me. And I want to welcome my friend Terry Tucker to Chatting with Besty.
Betsy,
Welcome.
That is so nice of you. Thank you very much for that introduction. I loved talking to you back in May last year. I am looking forward to talking with you today as well.
Oh, thank you. And you are so welcome. I can't thank you enough for running this book and doing all that you do. I mean, you are busy, Terry. You have now a new membership club that you're doing, coaching. You are on several podcasts, and you write a blog, don't you?
I do. Every morning, motivational check. Yeah.
Yes. And, you have a website. I mean, you just are ongoing, and yet you're still battling cancer. And to me, I admire you for that. And because you're not sitting home waiting to die. You are out there enjoying life, kicking cancer's rear end, and you are enjoying life. And this is why I encourage people who have dementia or their loved ones who have dementia, go out and enjoy life. Don't sit home and wait to die. Go out and, like I always say, kick Alzheimer's rear end and, live your life. And I want to ask you, Terry, like I ask all the authors on here, what motivated you to write your book, which I highly recommend. Folks, this is a bestseller as far as I'm concerned, and you need to get this book. But go ahead, Terry. I get so excited.
Thank you for that. I should hire you as my agent. You're awfully good at it, so thank you.
You're welcome.
The book was really born out of two conversations I had. One, I used to be a high school basketball coach, a girls' high school basketball coach when I lived in Texas, and I had one of my former players who moved to Colorado, where my wife and I live, with her fiance, and the four of us had dinner one night, and I remember saying to her after dinner that I was excited that she was living close and I could watch her find and live her purpose. And she got real quiet for a while, and she looked at me and she was like, well, Coach, what do you think my purpose is? I said, I have no idea what your purpose is, but that's what your life should be about, finding the reason you were put on the face of this earth and then living that reason. So that was one conversation. And then the second conversation was with a young man who reached out to me on social media and asked me what I thought were the most important things he should learn to not just be successful in his job or in business, but to be successful in life. And I didn't want to give him the, get up early, work hard, help others kind of thing. Not that those aren't important. Those are very important. But I wanted to see if I could go deeper with him. So I took some time and I wrote some notes, and eventually I had these 10 thoughts, these 10 ideas, these 10 principles. And so I sent them to him. And then I stepped back and I was like, well, I've got a life story that fits underneath this principle, or I know somebody whose life emulates that principle. So literally during the 3-month period where I was healing after I had my leg amputated because of cancer, and before I started chemotherapy for the tumors in my lungs, I sat down at the computer every day and I built stories, and they're real stories about real people underneath each of the principles. And that's how sustainable excellence came to be.
That is so awesome. And I know when you were on the last time, Terry, I discussed your book cover. And I'm looking at it again because I like your book cover because you had the, I call it the stepping stones, but the rocks, the stones that's on the cover, and yet it looks like it's foggy. So I take it this way. This is my take on your cover. You are taking the steps out of the fog. You take a step at a time into clarity. Or you could be clear, not know what your purpose is, and step into the fog. I just thought of those two thoughts. Just looking at your cover.
I like the latter one. I was very fortunate to have a small not-for-profit publishing company to work with to publish the book. So I had access to editors, I had access to cover designers, and having never written a book before, it was interesting to kind of step back, and they're like, well, what colors do you like, and what stuff? And then the first rendition that they gave me, I showed it to my wife and daughter and my brothers and that, and they're like, no, I don't think so. And then I think my daughter was the one who said, what about, as you say, stepping stones? What about some kind of a path to, that leads upward, that leads seems like it's leading somewhere, not just, it's going nowhere. And so I went back to them and I said, well, how about this? And then they came back with a second cover design, which is the one that's on the book now. So yeah, it was just a great experience for me to write a book and then be part of a publishing company. Not that there's anything wrong with publishing it on your own, but I didn't know what I didn't know when I wrote the book, so publishing it would have been even more difficult for me without the help of experts who knew what they were doing.
Well, your book, and when I hear you speak, and I want to tell the audience, folks, you have to go on Terry Tucker's website, and he has a list of the podcasts that he's been on. Tell you the name of your... it's www.motivationalcheck.com. That's your website, right, Terry?
Correct.
Okay. You have to go on there, folks. And I mean, you need to jump on there and read about Terry and hear him speak, because he will blow you away. He blows me away every time. And I just get so motivated because, Terry, as you know, it would be easy for you to sit home and be, woe is me. You have a terminal situation here. You don't know, how it's going to come out. But you are just living life to the fullest. And that's what I want people to know. And that's like a message of mine too. Live your life. And really, with Matt's journey, Matt was 66 when he died. My brother was 67. Life is short, folks. Know your purpose. And I think, let me know your thoughts on this, Terry. Do you find that I tell people when you're passionate about something, then you'll find your purpose. What's your philosophy on that?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And I think a lot of times where people get caught up is they feel that their purpose or their why in life has to be their job. It's like if I'm not, happy at my job, if I'm not, where I feel I should be professionally, then obviously I haven't reached my purpose. Now, certainly would be great if your purpose was your job, but it certainly doesn't have to be. I mean, your job could be something that's over here that you do to pay the bills, but your purpose or your passion or your why in life is to write or to be a podcaster like you are, or, to volunteer, or whatever it is that you feel is in your heart. And whenever I speak to young people especially, I always tell them this: if there's something in your heart, something in your soul that you believe you're supposed to do, but it scares you, go ahead and do it. Because at the end of your life, and Betsy, you probably know this more than anybody, at the end of your life, the things you're going to regret are not going to be the things you did. They're going to be the things you didn't do, and by then it's going to be too late to go back and do them.
Absolutely. And I heard you say that, Terry. And that's why I had to ask that guy, Rick Edelman, to my show. I said, I'm not going to be on my deathbed wondering, well, he really would have came on my show. And you're right. And I told that, too, and I worked with young people. Go for your dreams and don't let anyone squash you and tell you that you can't do that. If you want to do something and, finding a purpose in life, Terry, I mean, I never thought this would be my purpose. Like, I never pictured myself being a talk show host, believe me. And it was, Matt's journey that really changed my life and gave me a purpose. A different purpose. So in your life, did you find that your purpose changed as through different decades, or did it change once you were diagnosed with cancer?
No, I think my purpose changed, I'm not going to say frequently, but several times throughout my life. I think when I was young, you can't tell this from my voice, but I'm 6'8" tall, and I played basketball. I got a scholarship to play in college and played all the way up till I graduated. And so I think my purpose early on in my life when I was young was to play basketball. And then after I graduated from college, I really felt my purpose was to be in law enforcement. And eventually I got to that point. My father was dead set against me doing it. His father was a Chicago police officer from 1924 to 1954. So he was in Chicago during Prohibition, when alcohol was outlawed in the United States, during the Great Depression, the late 1920s, early 1930s, and then when the gangs, Al Capone and those guys were shooting up the town, and he was actually shot in the line of duty with his own gun. It was not a serious injury. He was shot in the ankle, but he always remembered the stories that my grandmother told about that knock on the door of, Mrs. Tucker, grab your son. My dad was an infant at the time. Come with us. Your husband's been shot. So when I expressed an interest in going into law enforcement, my father was, oh, absolutely not. You're going to go to college. You're going to major in business. You're going to get out, get a great job, have 2.4 kids and live happily ever after. But that's the life my father wanted me to live, not the life that I felt was my purpose. And so I waited until my father passed away and went into law enforcement. And so that was a purpose that, kind of got put on the back burner for a while, but eventually I got to it. And then now, as I'm probably coming to the end of my life, my goal is to put as much goodness, as much positivity, as much motivation, as much inspiration, as much love back into the world as I possibly can. And I will take that opportunity to thank you for allowing me to do that right now.
Oh, well, you are so welcome. It is my pleasure for sure. Been wanting to have you back on. I know that you're so busy talking all over, and folks, I'm not just saying this because Terry's my friend, but Terry is inspirational, and you really have to listen to his other talks and read his blog because I get blown away. I really do. I've said that before, but it's true. And I'm very, very grateful that you gave me this book to read, and Josh read it. And Josh loved the book. And sometimes I don't know what he understands, when he reads, but he did enjoy reading the book. And, I often think of you, like when I'm debating about whether I should go for something, and then I'm like, okay, what would Terry Tucker tell me to do? what would Terry's advice be? And it'd be to go for it. So you're just a big inspiration from afar for me, Terry, and I really appreciate all that you do to help others. Terry, I'd like you to talk about your membership and what that is, and what would people get from that?
Yeah, the membership was something that I, kind of like the book. People kept suggesting I write a book, and I was really, I'm not an author. I really kind of poo-pooed it. It was like, no, I don't think I want to do that. And I think enough people, so there's sort of that old joke that says when we talk to God, it's called prayer. When God talks to us, it's called schizophrenia. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you that, God ever spoke to me, but I think what God does is put people in your path and make suggestions. And I think when enough people make those suggestions, I think I'm smart enough to sort of buck up and say, well, maybe I ought to pay attention to this. And so that's what happened with the book. And then it started to happen with a membership. People were making this, you should have a membership. People who had either read the book or heard me on the different podcasts that I've been fortunate enough to be on were like, we would like to take those 10 principles and go deeper. Give us some suggestions and things like that. So I thought about it for a while and eventually decided I was going to try to pursue it. I just started it in June, and I started it in June, and then the following week I ended up going into treatment, another round of treatment for my cancer. So I'm like, probably wasn't the best timing in the world, but it's a membership that basically, I think, does three things. One, it's a deep dive into the chapters that are in my book. Each of the principles is a chapter in the book, and it takes a deeper dive into that, and it gives you things and suggestions that you can do to help, live your uncommon and extraordinary life, to not think with your fears and your insecurities, to become the person that you're looking to become and things like that. So that's one part of it, taking that deep dive with some suggestions and thoughts about how you can do that. And then there's also group coaching calls. So every month on several days during the month, I'll get on with whoever wants to get on, and we'll talk about the things that were in the videos that you watched and things like that, and see if I can answer any of your questions, or even if it's not in the videos. Again, I don't have all the answers, but I'm old enough and have had enough experience of different things that I can probably steer you in the right direction. And then the last thing, and I think in a lot of ways, this may be the most important thing, because I'm finding people sometimes don't even want to watch the videos, but the last thing that I have is a community of like-minded, leaders and young professionals, not just young professionals, but professionals in general, that can actually come together and sort of bounce things off each other. It's like, hey, what do you think about this? Or I'm going to do this. How did you do that? And it's fun for me to have that kind, because I'm in the community a lot, talking to people and things like that, and just listening to conversations that people are having. So again, basically a deep dive into the chapters into the book, group coaching calls, and then a community where you can sort of bounce things off of like-minded people. That's really what the membership is all about.
Oh, that sounds good. And you have a separate website for that. That's www.sustainableexcellencemembership.com.
That's correct.
Okay. And that's going to be in the blog, folks. So I always have to, tell people read the blog, because the information will be in there. Well, that sounds great. Terry, I want to go back to finding the purpose, because I'm in a lot of caregiving groups, and I find this when people who are grieving, and they lost their partner, they lost their spouse, and they're wondering, what's my purpose? They're like lost. They were caregiving for so many years, and now they're like, I don't know what to do. And I get very passionate. Like, find your purpose, find what you're passionate about. Do something that you always wanted to do but didn't have time to do. Maybe you wanted to do a new hobby. See what it's like to go to paint or to travel if you can. There's so many different things that people could do. Tutor kids, be a foster grandparent. There's just, people are in need. Go to a soup kitchen. I mean, I know now it's different with COVID, but there's just a lot of things that people can do. And with me personally, I find that when I help somebody, I feel better about myself. And never did I think, Terry, that my purpose, it blows me away, but I have to thank Jeannie White because she discovered me. She's station manager. Never did I think that my purpose would be to help others, to provide resources, to give people an opportunity to be heard, to help others. So my purpose has changed over my lifetime also. And I'm just blessed.
Exactly. And I think, I always tell people, I go on these podcasts and I talk about motivation and the need to keep moving forward and things like that. But I don't want people to think that, I mean, there's no S on my chest. I don't have a cape and fly around with magical powers. I have bad days. Every 3 weeks I go to the hospital for a week for therapy and things like that. I have bad days. And we all have those dark kind of, we're thinking, woe is me. I'm feeling sorry for myself. Mm-hmm. And I agree with you. Whenever I get into those situations, I think about, okay, we're looking internally at that point in time. It's all about me. Do exactly what you said, Betsy. Look externally. Find somebody whose life you can make a positive difference in. I mean, I'm lucky. I go to the hospital every 3 weeks. I can always find somebody who's worse off than I am. And when you stop looking inwardly and start projecting outwardly to try to help somebody, now all of a sudden your problems aren't that difficult. They're not that overwhelming. And then two, not only are they not that overwhelming, but now you're helping another individual. So it's kind of a double, it's a double whammy in a positive way, that your problems aren't that big and you're making a difference, a positive difference in someone else's life.
Yes. And I want, the audience to know, Terry, that you, as you said, you're still going for treatment. And it's perfectly understandable, hey, everyone has bad days, and you're having a rough day with treatment, not feeling well. And, you have every right to feel bad. And I encourage people, I grew up where you didn't validate your feelings. You stuffed them down. Well, now I know I can validate my feelings. If I feel sad, I acknowledge it. Instead of saying, I don't want to feel sad, I wish I didn't feel sad, then the more sad I felt. So I just said, okay, I feel sad. Why do I feel sad? And then I move on. And I went to a counselor a few years ago when Matt was in the mid of his journey. And I was on the verge of a nervous breakdown because I thought I had to be a superwoman, wear the cape. I was working and doing everything. And I was snapping at people. And I went to a counselor, and he was really great. And he said to me, Betsy, best advice I ever had. He said, Betsy, if you want to have a pity party, you go right ahead, set your timer for 15 minutes, have your pity party, and pack it up and move it along. And I share that because to me that was the best advice I ever heard from a counselor.
And that's great advice. And I remember when I got cancer, I made a decision early on that I was, and this hasn't been easy to carry out, but that I was never going to take my disease or the fact that I didn't feel good or whatever. out on a doctor or a nurse, or a therapist or a medical assistant that was trying to help me. It wasn't their fault that I got cancer. And so, why should I take it out on them? And I've seen a lot of people that are having bad days that take it out on other people. Now, I'm not, I understand you're having a bad day, but I guess I would caution you not, especially, and I'm sure Matt had a ton of bad days. My guess is he probably didn't take it out on you a lot, or did I miss that? But I guess what I'm trying to say is I try not to take it out on other people, and in a lot of ways, I guess I swallow a lot of that. Yeah, it's a bad day, but I'm not going to take it out on you because you're trying to help me.
Right. And I think that when we don't acknowledge, our feelings and we stuff them down, then we are going to snap at someone that because it's going to come back and bite you in the rear end. And this is how people get heart disease, and they get depression, and they get physically sick because they're holding all this crap in that they need to let go of. And I just, it took me until I'm 64, so it took me until I was 60 to learn all this. I wish there was people like you and books that, like you wrote back 40 years ago, if not more, when I was young. And I think it's great that, if someone young that's listening, you have your whole life ahead to gain from this wisdom that Terry Tucker has in his book, that he offers in his membership. If you're a millennial or in college, I don't know what a millennial is considered anymore. I can't remember. But, I wish I knew this information and not let people, tell me, oh, you can't do something. And, when I found this, Terry, and I don't know if you found it, but when someone becomes, successful, or you have a passion, and then people try to squash it down. Oh, you're doing too much, or, you're getting, you're just doing too much. You need to, I guess, shrink down. But I'm not in grammar school anymore or junior high, and I decided I'm not going to shrink down. I'm going to be who I am. And I think everyone needs to step in their power and to be who they are. And you definitely are in your power, Terry, and being who you are.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I remember back a couple of months ago, I read a story about a professor back in the 1950s at Johns Hopkins University who did a very simple experiment. And hang with me here because I'm going to talk about rats here in a minute. He took rats and he put them in a tank of water that was over their head. And he wanted to see how long the average rat could tread water before it would sink and drown. And the average rat treaded water for about 15 minutes. And just as those rats were getting ready to drown, he reached in, grabbed them, pulled them out, dried them off, and let them rest for a while. And then he took the exact same rats and put them in the exact same tank of water a second time. And the second time around, those rats treaded water on average for 60 hours. Now think about that. 15 minutes. You're just not going to fail. You're going to die. You're going to drown. The second time around, 60 hours, which said to me two things. Number one, the importance of hope in our lives. We have to believe that maybe not today, maybe not next month, maybe not even next year, but at some point in our life, our lives are going to improve. Our lives are going to get better. And the second thing that they taught me was just how much more our physical bodies can handle than we ever thought they could. I mean, I think we all have a breaking point. I think we all have a point where I just can't do it anymore. But I really believe, and the older I get and the more I deal with this disease, I really believe that breaking point is so much further down the road than we ever thought it really could be.
Yes. Yes, I agree. I tell people, and I'm a believer, so I give God the glory and the praise. I don't know. It's by God's grace. That's all I could say. How I made it through 10 years of caregiving with my own issues, and coming through with my health intact and my sanity intact, because I would be so exhausted, Terry, that I didn't even know how I could take another step. And you really, I tell people, you're stronger than you think. You had the strength already in you. You just have to harness it. And I say call upon it, but everyone has their strengths. They just don't realize it.
They don't, and that's why I go back to, yes, we all have a breaking point, but that breaking point is so much further down the road. I mean, my wife works with a young man who is a former Navy SEAL, some of the toughest men that we have in the military, and the SEALs talk about what they call their 40% rule, which basically says that if you're done, if you're at the end of your rope, if you can't go on, you're only at 40% of your maximum, and you still have another 60% left in reserve to give to yourself. So the next time, whatever you're doing, whether it's, what you did with Matt, in terms of caregiving, whether it's I can't stay late at the office anymore and do this report, or you know what, I can't get off the couch and go to the gym if that's something you feel you need to do, realize that you still have that 60% left in reserve to give to yourself, and use it when you need it.
Wow, I like that. I like that a lot. I just think that your book, Terry, is full of your principles are great. The wisdom, the quotes that you have at each chapter, I can't say enough. Really, I can't heap enough praise on your book, Terry, and you, because you are an inspiration. People think, oh, they do. I mean, I see it. Woe is me attitude, and I had to learn. I mean, I learned this. When you are depressed, and yes, there's some people who need professional help, who need to take antidepressant. I get that. That's fine. And, get the help. But when someone is constantly negative and you're around negative people, you're going to stay negative. You're going to attract negative people. And it's when I lost my negativity, because I was pessimist for most of my life until the age of 60. And then when I started to look in on the bright side and being more positive, I started to attract positive people. And I'm grateful, and I know this might sound bizarre to some people, but Matt's journey changed my life and changed my life for the better. And I had the mindset, and I think, Terry, I know you have a mindset. You have to have a mindset that something's not going to defeat you, that you're going to overcome it. And I don't mean like, if you have a terminal disease, of course you may not overcome, you're not going to overcome that. But to live your life, or if you're a caregiver, don't let that drag you down. There's life during caregiving. There's life after caregiving. And I know that because I'm an example that someone can survive it and thrive during caregiving. And I think you are, I mean, I don't know you, personally that well, but I think you are thriving during your journey with cancer. And maybe you wouldn't have thrived. Yeah. You wouldn't have thrived otherwise, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah. I had a nurse ask me recently, what was it like to, in 2018, I had my foot amputated first, and then in 2020, had my leg amputated. And she was like, well, what has it been like for you? You were always an active guy. You played basketball in college. You've always been active. Now all of a sudden you don't have a leg. And I told her, I said, it certainly has not been easy. It's been 2 years since my amputation, and I'm still learning how to walk again with a prosthetic. But what I told her was that cancer can take all my physical faculties, but cancer can't touch my mind, it can't touch my heart, and it can't touch my soul. And that's who I am. That's who you are, Betsy. That's who, your audience is. Your heart, your mind, and your soul. So, I don't get too excited. If you look at my lower body, it's all full of scars, but I've earned those scars. I've been through heck and back, to get those scars. So I'm proud of them. So, don't get all excited when, oh, this doesn't work or I feel bad or something like that. Remember who you really are. You are your heart. You are your mind. You are your soul.
Wow, I love that, Terry. I love that. Terry, I love talking to you. I'd like to ask you, do you have any words of wisdom you'd like to impart to the audience? Can't believe how fast the time goes.
I know it does, doesn't it? Let me, if you don't mind, I'll end with a story. I've always been a big fan of Westerns growing up. When I was young, my mom and dad used to let me stay up late and watch, Gunsmoke and Bonanza and Wild West.
I remember that.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, it was always my favorite. 1993, the movie Tombstone came out. And it starred Val Kilmer as a man by the name of John Doc Holliday and Kurt Russell as a man by the name of Wyatt Earp. Now, Doc Holliday and Wyatt Earp were two living, breathing human beings who walked on the face of the earth. They're not just made-up characters for the movie. Now, Doc was called Doc because he was a dentist by trade, but pretty much Doc Holliday was a gunslinger and a card shark. And Wyatt Earp, most of his adult life, had been some form of a lawman. And somehow these two men from entirely opposite backgrounds come together and form this very close friendship. And at the end of the movie, Doc Holliday is dying at a sanitarium in Glenwood Springs, Colorado, which is about 3 hours from where I live. The real Doc Holliday died at that sanitarium, and he's buried in the Glenwood Springs Cemetery. And Wyatt, at this point in his life, is destitute. He has no money, he has no job, he has no prospects for a job, so every day he comes to play cards with Doc, and the two men pass the time that way. And in this almost last scene in the movie, they're talking about what they want out of life. And Doc says, I was in love with my cousin when I was younger, but she joined a convent over the affair, but she's all that I ever wanted. And then he looks at Wyatt and says, what about you, Wyatt? What do you want? And Wyatt kind of nonchalantly says, I just want to lead a normal life. And Doc looks at him and says, there's no normal, there's just life, and get on with living yours. Betsy, you and I probably know there's probably people out there listening in your audience right now that are sort of sitting back and saying, well, when this happens, I'll have a normal life. Or when this arises, I'll have a successful life. Or when this occurs, I'll have a significant life. What I'd like to leave your audience with is this. Don't wait. Don't wait for life to come to you. Get out there, find the reason you were put on the face of this earth, use your unique gifts and talents, and live that reason. Because if you do, at the end of your life, I'm going to promise you two things. Number one, you're going to be a whole lot happier. And number two, you're going to have a whole lot more peace in your heart.
That's beautiful. Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you so much, Terry. Terry Tucker, everybody. Author of Sustainable Excellence, 10 Principles to Leading Your Uncommon and Extraordinary Life. It is available on Amazon.com, and it's available on your website, isn't it, Terry?
It is. And actually, if you go to my membership, sustainableexcellencemembership.com, you can download a free copy of the book.
Oh, okay. Good luck to you. Best wishes on your more sales of your book and on your new membership, your new ventures, and I wish you the best. Wish you well, Terry. You are a fighter. You are definitely you are a kick-butt cancer warrior for sure. And I just appreciate talking to you. You are an inspiration and you are a motivator. Folks, thank you for listening. Please share this podcast. Somebody needs to hear it that you know. And I always say this, chatting with Betsy is not about me. It's about helping people because nobody should ever feel alone in what they're going through. There are resources. There are people that can help you, and that's what I'm here for. And when you share this podcast, you are helping me pay it forward and honoring Matt's life, because he's the catalyst of why there is a Chatting with Betsy. And I want to thank everyone for listening. And I want to thank Jeannie White, who's station manager, who writes the blog. Please read the blog because it's going to have information about Terry Tucker, and produces the show. And I want to thank Lillian Caldwell, CEO of Passion World Talk Radio, who makes this all possible. And it is free to subscribe to Chatting with Betsy wherever you hear your favorite podcasts, Spotify, Spreaker, CastBox. I'm on many, many different platforms. And I have phenomenal guests, and you need to subscribe, and it is for free. And that's what I have to say today, folks. So please, just help me help others. That's my mission and my vision, is to help other people. That's my purpose. And that's what I'm doing, and I'm very grateful, and I am blessed. And I want to thank you all for that, and Lillian Caldwell and Jeannie White. And they gave me a purpose. Jeannie White discovering me gave me a purpose, a different purpose than what I had, and I'm forever grateful for that. And as I always say, folks, in a world where you could be anything, to please be kind. So that's all I have to say. Thank you, everyone. This is Betsy Wurzel, your host of Chatting with Betsy on Passionate World Talk Radio. Bye-bye now.
Are you looking for an internet talk radio station for your podcast? Look no further. At the helm of Passionate World Talk Radio are two women that want to provide a spot for you and your podcast to be heard. There are many other places for your podcast, but PWTR has the audience. You will not be disappointed. Our station has been on the internet for the past 16 years. Call us for more information. 484-364-1032 or text Jeannie White, station manager, at THECONNECTSHOW@gmail.com for podcast show details. Thank you for listening to Passionate World Talk Radio. You can listen to this program all over again by going over to https://passionateworldtalkradio.com. You can also hear it on Spotify, Spreaker, Amazon Alexa, AMFM247.com every Tuesday evening between 8 and 9 p.m. YouTube, Facebook Live, LinkedIn, and all the other podcast directories one can find on the internet.